Hey, this is Rue. Today I'm doing another EU4 challenge run. This one comes from a viewer suggestion, which I always appreciate. Starting as Iceland, we're going to try to form the Roman Empire. Along the way, we have to convert to the Norse religion and the theocracy government type as soon as possible. And to add a little extra challenge, we have to do this without ever making a single alliance. Let's get into it. Iceland starts the game as part of Norway, so the first thing we have to do is release ourselves. There's a bunch of cheesy stuff you can do before releasing nations. Dumping a bunch of dev into the subject, transferring gold via buildings, deleting military, forcing bankruptcy, and so on. But that's lame and we're not going to do any of that. One advantage of playing as a release tag is that we start with 100% crown land, which is nice. I load up on estate privileges, including the ones that increase governing capacity. There's not really a reason to take these now, but I guess seeing all that crown land went to my head. Here's our starting estate setup. One of the privileges we took was the Burgher's Force Draft, which lets us start building our first heavy with no cost in gold or sailors. I send our merchant to collect in the North Sea and start improving relations with Austria. Unfortunately, that's about all we can do for now. We have a 5-year truce with Norway, 1,000 manpower, and no sailors. Let's take a quick look at our national ideas. Iceland has more flavor than you might expect, including unique national ideas. These are okay, but unfortunately they're somewhat geared towards a colonial game, which we're not going to do. We'll talk more about that later. I've divided this run into several phases, which I'll talk about as we get to them. Obviously, phase 1 is independence from Norway. This is easier than you might think, although it did take me a couple tries to figure out the best technique. One of the tricky things about getting independence as Iceland is that we're technically the subject of a subject. Norway and Sweden start the game in unions under Denmark. Since Norway doesn't have rivals, it can be hard to get anybody to support your independence. Finland has the same problem. In our case, it doesn't matter, since we can't make alliances, we're on our own anyways. Another option is waiting for the Swedish Independence War, which usually gives Denmark and its allies more than they can handle. But we don't have time. Sweden can take years or even decades to declare independence, and often Norway will try to annex us before then. In terms of preparation, I trained 4 infantry regiments and a couple transports. We hired the Free Company in early 1449 before our truce comes up, and we grab 1 more infantry regiment in December. Our relations are too good with Norway, so we scornfully insult them before declaring war in January of 1450. With the war declared, I use our admin and diplo points to dev. It's better to wait and do this after declaring war to avoid the vassal dev penalty. I'm not using any mill points here. We need those to stay current on mill tech. On paper, this war's a disaster. Denmark and its allies and subjects have 57,000 troops while we have 9,000. At sea, we're outnumbered even more badly. But we have 2 things going for us: limited enemy transports and poor coordination. Denmark has the largest transport fleet, with 10, so that's the max army size we'll have to face. There's a delicate balancing act here. We want to bait Denmark into landing troops, which we can then defeat for war score. If our army's too strong, the AI won't naval invade and we'll be stuck with just ticking war score. If our army's too weak, we'll lose to the Danish troops and the run's over. Maxing out ticking war score gives enough for independence but not much else, and we want more than that. We spot the first Danish troops trying to land in March of 1450. If we respond too quickly, the AI will cancel the landing, so I wait until their movement's locked before moving our troops east. While we're here, let's appreciate the Icelandic unit model, which I think is the only one in the game to feature a harpoon. We arrive just a couple days before Denmark, and we get pretty lucky with our rolls. Denmark gets a -3 penalty here between the terrain and landing, but it's still possible to lose these, which would end the run. We chase the Danes west into Reykjavik, where we get a stack wipe. Between these 2 battles, we picked up 25 war score, which is why baiting these landings is so important. Denmark's back for round 2 in November of 1450 with the same result, although we're less lucky with rolls and the battle's closer. Once again, we chase them west, but we don't get a stack wipe until we follow them back east for a 3rd battle. I start building a couple more transports in June of 1451. We need 4 to transport the Free Company. Let's talk for a second about the peace deal. We'll be able to take land, but there's several different ways we can go. One option is taking Orkney or the Shetland Islands, which would set us up for a run at Scotland and eventually England. Another option is taking a foothold in Norway. This makes future wars easier, especially if we declare at the same time Sweden declares independence. But we're going to go with the 3rd option, which we take in November of 1455, fully annexing Holstein. We finish coring in 1460, and in August I move our capital to Jutland. We've kept up good relations with Austria, who immediately lets us join the Holy Roman Empire. There are pros and cons to joining the HRE, but for a no allies run, being in the Empire will give us a defensive shield against external threats, which is very useful. I consider this the end of Phase 1. Unfortunately, these phases are just going to get harder. Phase 2 of this run's about expanding and developing a power base in the Lubeck and English Channel trade nodes. This alone is pretty straightforward. If you want a more detailed walkthrough, I have a Ditmartian playthrough up in which I do exactly that. The tricky part here is going to be the Norse conversion. There are two ways to bring back the Norse faith in EU4, and both have issues. The first way is straightforward but slow and unreliable. It involves holding a particular province in central Sweden and hoping your ruler rolls a particular skill trait combo. Timing's an issue. The event's only available during the Age of Discovery, and it can take forever to fire if it fires at all. This option works better for Sweden than it does Iceland, and it usually requires save scumming or numerous restarts. We're not going to do all that, which leaves just one other method, an event during the Age of Reformation requiring animist zealots to take control of a Scandinavian province. The problem here, of course, is that there are no animists within 4,000 miles of Iceland, so I would call this option more reliable but less straightforward. But we'll get to all that. For now, let's cover some quick expansion. Our first war is against Oldenburg in December of 1462. We get the notification in January of 1464 that Austria got the Hungarian Union. In the short term, this is great for us. Our defensive shield just got stronger, but in the long term, not so much. We can pull a little trick here. During our war with Oldenburg, East Frisia also declared on them. East Frisia has too many allies to go after on their own, but if we vassalize Oldenburg, we take control of the defensive war against East Frisia. We do exactly that in August of 1464, giving us war control and letting us march straight into East Frisia. We make peace in March of 1465, taking their only province. My goal in this phase is to expand west towards the coast of Holland. These are good provinces and move us in the right direction towards provinces eligible for the Roman Empire. Speaking of which, since that's the long-term goal, I'll put up a map showing provinces required to form the Roman Empire. We need 425 of the highlighted provinces. Our next war is against Munster in July of 1466. I apologize for not showing a lot of battle details. I want to keep the pace up in this video since this is a long run and fighting these small HRE tags isn't much of a challenge. We end the war in October of 1468, humiliating Munster and taking 2 provinces. Utrecht is next, with us declaring war a month later. We finish this war in June of 1470, taking 1 province and demanding war reparations. In October of 1472, Sweden declares an independence war against Denmark. We wait a year, then attack Denmark once most of their allies are occupied. The English fleet, allied to Sweden, gives us naval superiority to cross the required straits and siege the Danish capital. Sweden makes peace in August of 1476, getting independence and 10 provinces. We follow suit a year later, taking 4 provinces, war reparations, and humiliating our rival. Verdun's next, and we declare in March of 1479. Verdun unconditionally surrenders in July of 1480, but we're running into coalition issues and we wait until January of 1481 to take the province of Stad. I do want to show one cheeky little move here. In December of 1482, Bremen annexes its neighbor. I didn't want to eat the AE from taking Bremen, but taking a second province forces them out of being a free city, and on the next month tick they're just another HRE republic, so we declare in January of 1483. The EU4 AI really makes some big brain plays. Right after we declare war, they accept an unlawful territory demand from the emperor and lose their second province anyways. The war's pretty easy, but once again we're on the brink of a coalition and we have to wait a couple years. We finally end the war in January of 1488, taking their sole province. We go back for round 2, or round 3 if you count the Independence War, against Denmark in February of 1492. We don't have much AE to spare, so this is a humiliation war, and we end it in May of 1496 by showing strength. I hate to do it, but in July of 1496 we go after our comrades from our last challenge run, the Peasants' Republic of Dithmarschen. I think it's a personal issue, but I really dislike disconnected borders and having to transport troops all the time. We'll get into that more later. Sweden finishes another war with Denmark in November of 1497, fully annexing them and thereby freeing Norway. A month later I kick off our Icelandic Golden Era. The following June we get the rare but broken Lux Stella event, giving us a ridiculous 456 ruler. We make peace with Dithmarschen in May of 1499, taking their only province. Notice how some of these provinces get renamed to what I assume must be Icelandic and with letters I don't even recognize. As we go, there are going to be a shocking number of localized Icelandic province names. I have no idea how to say any of them, so in general I'm going to stick with the English version whenever possible, Rome, London, and so on. Helra is next, and we declare war in June of 1499. This war takes just under 2 years, with us requiring their full annexation in April of 1501. Let's touch on ideas. I open with quantity and grab the first idea in expansion in August of 1503. We get explorers from our national tradition, so we won't need exploration ideas in this run. We establish our first colony in July of 1505 on the eastern coast of Newfoundland. This isn't picked randomly, but we'll get to that in a bit. In April of 1507, Burgundy breaks their alliance with Utrecht, which is the green light we've been waiting for, and we immediately declare war. The war lasts just 13 months and we fully annex them. Next up is another Dutch minor, Friesland, in December of 1509. Friesland's allied to Norway, and we separate peace them in August of 1512, demanding their vassalization. We make peace with Friesland in January of 1513 with another full annexation. The Protestant Reformation fires in August of 1514, which means we're only 5 years out from the Age of Reformation. In September, we start getting ticks towards the Dutch Revolt, which we had so much fun with in our Dithmarschen run. This time, we're going to immediately bypass the whole disaster by simply moving our capital to East Frisia. We declare a second war on Munster in December of 1515. Mid-war, we get a cool event, the English Age of Iceland, in December of 1517, which gives us some money and tin-based dev across the island of Iceland. We make peace with Munster a month later, taking their only province. One interesting thing about this run, we never get an unlawful territory demand from the Emperor at any point. I've intentionally kept relations high, typically over 100, but this still surprises me and I wonder if it's a bug. We finish our colony in Newfoundland in September of 1518, and in March we set up our second colony, in what would today be North Carolina. For our third group, I pick espionage. AE is already a problem and it's only going to get worse. In October of 1526, I recall our colonist from North Carolina and send him to Honduras. This colony neighbors an Animas province, which lets us fabricate a claim and declare war on the local Mayan tribe. We take just one province in the peace deal. I have missionary maintenance at 0 and immediately send a missionary to make sure we get religious rebels. Let's keep a timeline of this process. We have Animas zealots at 0% in December of 1528. The rebels get to 50% support in August of 1532, and we immediately provoke them. Now, rebels have kind of a funny system in EU4. These rebels are so mad that they'll take rafts overseas, but they'll only go so far, I think around 200 colonial range. So basically, we're going to have to leapfrog these rebels up the coast of America and into Iceland. I guess in a slight nod to realism, these overseas rebel trips do take a long time. I'm picturing Animas rebels taking rafts northwards across the Caribbean in search of an Icelandic colony to convert. The first journey, from Honduras to North Carolina, is completed at the end of March 1534. The second journey, from North Carolina to Newfoundland, is completed at the end of December 1535. With the zealots past it, we can abandon our colony in North Carolina. We no longer need expansion ideas, and in March of 1536 we switch to religious. The third leg of the zealots' grand journey ends in July of 1537, with rafts arriving off the western coast of Iceland. Google Maps puts this total journey at over 4,600 miles, and that's as the crow flies, so by sea this would be even longer. These are some motivated zealots. They take control of Reykjavik in September of 1537, which fulfills the requirements for the event, the Awakening of the Norse Faith. This event has a mean time of just 24 months, so in theory it should have a 50% chance of happening in the next 2 years. While we wait, we declare war on Lubeck in September of 1543. This is a pretty quick war, and we make peace the following May, taking 2 provinces. In November of 1544, we declare another war, this time on Lüneburg. In December of 1545, after over 8 years, the event finally fires. The text here is kind of cool, talking about how the Animas zealots found ancient Viking runestones and they now believe in the gods of Asgard. Once they occupy Iceland, our new Norse rebels have one last voyage to make by raft, braving the Atlantic again as well as the North Sea. We make peace with Lüneburg in November of 1546, taking 2 provinces. We give our Central American province back to the Mayans and wish them luck against Castile. The Norse rebels make landfall in May of 1547 and spend the next 2 years sieging down our continental provinces. They break our country in July of 1549, converting us to the Norse religion. Unfortunately, some separatist rebels enforced at the same time, so we lost 2 provinces back to Lüneburg. This was a rookie mistake by me. I lost track of which rebels had which occupations. Here's the completed chart. If you count from when we first took the Animas province, that's about 21 years. If you count from when we first started colonizing Newfoundland, it's much longer, 44 years. In February of 1551, per the run rules, we switched to a theocracy. Let's take a look at our government reforms. For Tier 1, we're going to be a monastic order, because a Norse monastic order sounds kind of ridiculous and cool at the same time. We're going to have to do a lot of converting this run, so for Tiers 2 and 3, we're going to pick missionary bonuses. Tier 4 is where it gets fun, embedded Norse traditions, which lets us raid coasts. The rest of the Norse religion is honestly pretty bad, but this alone salvages it since coastal raiding is so strong. Navies are going to be a major part of this run, so for Tier 5 we take naval professionalism. In March of 1551 we put our new reforms to use, raiding the Baltic coast for the first of what will be many times. This is why raiding is so strong. This isn't even that many provinces and we still made over 250 gold. We declare our next war against Lubeck in October of 1555. This is probably a mistake, but I want to reconnect our territory after losing Lüneburg to rebels. We make peace after a year of fighting, taking 2 provinces. Experienced EU4 players might notice an issue here. With espionage ideas, taking 2 low-dev provinces shouldn't cost 28 AE, even in the HRE. There's a complicated formula on the wiki, but the short version is that Christians don't like it when pagans take their land, which is fair enough, but it's going to make this run a lot more tricky. That about wraps up Phase 2, which was about establishing a power base and converting to Norse, which we've now completed. There's definitely room for improvement. We're now 112 years into the game, and we don't have a single province needed for the Roman Empire. As we move into Phase 3, getting the provinces we need for the Roman Empire, let's take a look at the state of Europe as of February of 1560. As expected, Muscovies formed Russia, but more interestingly, we have not one but 2 unusual tags in the Middle East, Egypt and Gurkhani, formed by the Mamluks and Timurids respectively. We kick Phase 3 off with our first serious war since independence against Burgundy in February of 1563. Burgundy's still independent and having a strong game, but they're at war with Austria, which gives us a window. Russia makes peace with Sweden in February of 1566, taking a huge chunk of Scandinavia. We make peace with Burgundy 2 years later, humiliating them and taking 3 provinces in the Low Countries. This peace deal is significant because 2 of these 3 provinces are eligible to restore the Roman Empire. 2 down, 423 to go. Next up is a reconquest war against Sweden, which we declare in January of 1569. We make peace in November of 1571, taking all of Norway's cores back as well as the province of Stockholm for ourselves. In July of 1572, we unlock our next idea group, and I go with a somewhat unconventional choice, naval ideas. Our navy needs a quality boost. We lost some battles to Burgundy at even odds, and I really want the ability to do free coastal barrages. In May of 1574, we take the decision to restore the Temple of Uppsala, which was the main reason I took Stockholm in the first place. This temple gives us an extra missionary, some missionary strength, and 1 tolerance of the true faith. We declare our next war against Helra in September of 1579. Just a month into the war, the Evangelical Union event fires, and we make peace in March, demanding their full annexation. Here's a look at the leagues. This one feels pretty evenly balanced, with Austria, Russia, and Aragon on the Catholic side, and the Ottomans, PLC, and England on the other. We have claims in northern Germany held by members of the Protestant League, and Austria has actually treated us surprisingly well this game, so we joined the Catholic League. Unfortunately, being in the Catholic League pulls us into a war I want no part of, a Russian succession war in April of 1581. Austria got Russia as a PU, and the PLC contested the succession by declaring a suicidal war into the whole Catholic League. Maybe someday I'll understand EU4 AI, but not today. A year later, the main event kicks off, with Brandenburg declaring the League War on Austria. We do take one small prize from the PLC war. We occupied the island of Gotland, which Austria gives to our subject Norway in a separate peace in April of 1582. Gotland had been raiding our coast, which is obviously unacceptable. We're the only ones who should be raiding. Speaking of raiding, we're now close enough to raid the entire British coastline, which we do in November and December of 1586. The Austrian Commonwealth War ends with Austria keeping the Russian PU and taking 4 provinces from the PLC. Mid-League War, we declare on Burgundy for the second time in March of 1588. The League War ends in December and we get absolutely nothing. It's debatable whether these are even worth joining, especially in a no allies run. We do get a lengthy army tradition buff, but I'm not sure it's worth the opportunity cost. We end the Burgundian War in January of 1590, taking 3 more provinces in the Low Countries. 72 AE for 3 provinces is bonkers, especially considering we have espionage ideas. The religious group penalty is worse than I thought, and we're going to have to shift our approach going forward. We finished religious ideas, which gives us access to the Deus Vult CB, which should help a little bit with AE. We declare our first crusade against Sweden in February of 1591. We make peace in the fall of 1593, taking 6 provinces. Norway has claims to all this land, I think from their mission tree, so we'll let them core it and we'll just annex them. Austria makes Lübeck into an elector and we declare on them in December of 1594. Mid-war we declare on Ferden, who actually have our religion, which is strange to see. They have no allies and we end the war quickly, taking their only province. We end the Lübeckian War in April of 1602, vassalizing them. My idea here is having Lübeck as a vassal would give us a chance to take the electorate from them, like we did in the Dithmarschen run, but I don't think it was worth the time in this case. We go back for a second crusade against Sweden in May of 1604. We make peace 2 years later, giving another 4 provinces to Norway. It's time for another crusade, this time against England in September of 1606. We separate peace Gascony in June of 1608, taking 1 province. When France takes their other province, which will happen shortly, we'll release them as a vassal. Mid-war we declare on Kallenberg in July of 1610. That war's over in just 3 months and we annex their only province. We don't have enough troops to land in England, so that war drags on until 1611. We take 2 provinces in the peace deal, one of which we use to release Flanders. Burgundy's next, with another war in March of the same year. This peace deal is a little different. I was able to occupy a province in Sardinia, which we demand in the peace deal along with Brussels. We now have a raiding outpost in the Mediterranean, which we immediately put to use, raiding France, Venice, Naples, and even Tunis. We declare a third crusade against Sweden in January of 1616. This one takes about 3.5 years, and we take another 4 provinces. In May of 1620, we finish the annexation of Norway, and we put our missionaries to work converting all these Protestant provinces. We're up to 4 missionaries and 17.5% missionary strength, which is really strong. Next up is a reconquest war against England. We take our 5th idea group in April of 1622, influence ideas. Vassal feeding's clearly the way to go with this run, and influence will help with that across the board. In August of 1623, we get the last Norse flavor event of the game, the return of the Norse culture. This changes our primary culture from Icelandic to Norse, as well as converting all our other Scandinavian culture provinces. We also have an option to change ideas, which we do. These are just better than Iceland's, including some nice naval bonuses and the ability to raid without having to take a government reform. Mid-war, I spot an Italian OPM with no allies, and we declare on Lucca in April of 1626. With our free coastal barrage, we capture their capital in just 40 days, and we annex them in June. The English peace deal is next, and we take our Flemish core back as well as a province in northwestern France. We use that French province to release Normandy as a vassal. In March of 1627, we take the Norse raiding fleet as our naval doctrine. The privateer efficiency isn't that good, but +3 fleet movement speed is borderline broken. We declare another crusade against Burgundy later that month. We end the war in the summer of 1628, taking just 1 province. It feels like we're permanently on the brink of a major HRE coalition, which is really slowing expansion. We have to expand elsewhere, so we declare a crusade against Venice in September of 1629. We separate peace the Knights in August of 1631, taking Rhodes. This will be another great raiding outpost and let us reach both the Ottomans and Egypt. We end the Venetian War in May of 1632, taking the province of Genoa, which we immediately use to release Milan as a vassal. Here's a look at the new raiding opportunities available by taking Rhodes. Sweden has just 2 provinces left in the Old World, and we finish them off in February of 1634. England has formed Great Britain, and we declare a reconquest war in December. We're still in what I would consider the mid-game, and already these enemy alliances are getting ridiculous, especially for a no-allies run. Take a look at this French alliance network in February of 1638, 850,000 troops with a force limit of 1.4 million. For reference, that force limit is larger than the active forces of the entire 2025 US military. In October of 1638, we get a funny event, Volunteers for the Holy Fight. Considering we're the only Norse nation in the world, I'm not sure where these guys are coming from, but I guess we'll take them. We make peace with Great Britain in May of 1639, taking 3 of our subjects' cores back. This is a best-case scenario, a reconquest war with 3 cores being returned, and we're still picking up 23 AE. Here's a declaration you don't see every day. Maine declaring on Gurkhani with the Unified China CB. Gurkhani is actually getting beat up pretty bad. They've lost multiple wars to both the Ottomans and Egypt, which are refusing to fight each other. And the hits keep on coming. In January of 1641, Austria-Hungary declares on Gurkhani on behalf of their Russian PU. We head back to Italy for our next war, declaring on Naples in February of 1643. This is a quick war, but once again AE is out of control. We end up taking just 2 provinces at the cost of 51 AE. One solution to our AE troubles is to go after a different religious group, but we haven't had a CB until recently. We're able to fabricate a claim on the Ottomans and declare war in June of 1645. In December of 1646, we unlock our Tier 9 theocracy reform, and this is one of my favorites, Pursuit of Knowledge. This lets us see monarch skills for all 4 candidates, which more or less guarantees high-tier rulers for the rest of the game. As a side note, the Icelandic occupation color on top of the French blue is really hard to see. I guess Paradox wasn't anticipating too many Icelandic-French conflicts. We separate peace France in October of 1647, forcing them to end their alliances with Aragon and the Ottomans. Unfortunately, France and the Ottomans are now historical friends because of an event, and they're going to keep allying each other the rest of the game. It's not until September of 1653, over 8 years into the war, that we finally step into Ottoman territory, and we don't make peace for another 3.5 years. We end up taking 3 provinces, including Constantinople. With the war over, we release Bulgaria and Greece as vassals. France is our next target, and we declare a reconquest war in April of 1658. Look at this event from October, expansion of the Norse faith. We could take a 50 relations hit with all of Europe just to get 1 temporary claim. We separate peace Scotland in June of 1664, taking the Faroe and Shetland Islands. These obviously aren't required for the Roman Empire, but they're part of our home region and culture group. We make peace with France in September of 1664, taking back all of Gascony's cores and taking 2 additional provinces. We use one of those provinces to release another subject, Provence. A month later, we declare another crusade against the British. For the first time, we land troops in the British Isles, coming ashore in southern Ireland in January of 1667. We finish the war in November of 1668, taking 2 provinces in northern France and 4 in England. We annex a Belgian minor next in November of 1670. It's back to war with the Ottomans, but this time with a reconquest war. The Ottomans are allied to both Great Britain and France, which is always a good time. We go from north to south, knocking Great Britain out of the war in November of 1673 and France 2 years later. We fight the Ottomans for another 8 years, making peace at the end of 1683. We take all of Bulgaria's cores back, as well as a large chunk of Greece. We also take one Georgian province, which we release as a vassal. We catch Great Britain without allies in April of 1685, so we declare yet another crusade. We end the war after 3.5 years, taking 6 provinces in central England. We unlock a couple ideas in June of 1689. For our 6th group, I went offensive. By 1690, we've unlocked the advanced CBs, nationalism and imperialism, which we put to use against Egypt. After a 6-year war, we make peace at the end of 1696, taking 15 provinces across northern Egypt and Syria. After the war, we immediately release Syria as a vassal. Next up is a reconquest war against Venice in May of 1698. We separate peace Castile in December of 1701, taking 1 province in northern Iberia. We reach a deal with Venice shortly afterwards, demanding the return of all of Milan's cores as well as returning Corfu to Greece. In June of 1702, we declare another reconquest war, this time on the Ottomans. This is another longer war, taking over 7 years, but we reach a peace deal in 1709, taking 2 provinces for ourselves and returning a number of cores to Georgia, Greece, and Syria. In November of 1709, we finally leave the HRE, and we upgrade our government rank twice, first to Holy State and then to Theocratic Empire. We could have done this a while ago, but it was nice to have the Emperor as a defensive shield. Our next war is against Great Britain in June of 1711. They're allied with the PLC, which makes for an annoying multi-front war. We make peace in August of 1715, taking 7 provinces across central England. Here's a quick refresher. These provinces do in fact count towards forming the Roman Empire. The 13 colonies declare independence from Great Britain in March of 1716, 60 years ahead of schedule. We go after Venice again in December, and we co-CB the Papal State. We make peace with the Papal State first in May of 1717, taking Rome. We don't have much AE left, so when we make peace with Venice, we take just 1 province, the Highlands Fort in Treviso. We head east again, declaring a second war against Egypt in February of 1718. Fighting Egypt or the Mamluks in this position is one of my least favorite places to fight. The terrain's awful, pushing into the Arabian Desert in particular, but even worse is the fact that the AI always has control of the strait at the south end of the Red Sea, and can move armies back and forth between Africa and Arabia while we can't. We reach a deal in August of 1720, taking 4 Syrian cores back and 1 province of our own in Palestine. France is next, with a reconquest war in November of 1721. In April of 1724, Great Britain makes peace with the 13 colonies, which makes for an interesting combo in the New World: Illinois, Canada, and the United States. We end the French War in October of 1724, taking all 4 of our subjects' cores and 1 province in northern France. We catch the Ottomans with dishonoring allies later that month and declare another war. This one takes 2 years, and we take a chunk of provinces in both the Balkans and eastern Anatolia. The Ottomans are getting weak enough that I'm worried about other nations taking a chunk out of them, a fear which is unfortunately going to be well-founded. Next up is Castile, with a reconquest war in July of 1728. I know I've been going fast and skipping battles, but I have to show this one, an epic naval battle off the Portuguese coast. This battle starts on December 18th and goes for 110 days, which I think is a record for me. I'm sure the multiplayer guys see stuff like this all the time, but for single player this is pretty wild, as is the +7 war score in a conflict of this scale. We end the war in July of 1731, taking 5 cores back for our subject, 1 province in southern Iberia, and 3 in North Africa. In February of 1732, we declare on Austria-Hungary, who with Russia and allies have over 1.6 million soldiers. We'll talk about it more later, but the late-game alliance blocks and troop creep can really get out of hand. 3.5 years into the war, we've occupied the vast majority of Austria-Hungary, and we only have 10% war score. It takes another 6 years, but we finally end the war in October of 1741, breaking the Russian PU. Naples is next, and we're able to use a reconquest CB for Provence. Provence has a mission that gives them cores in southern Italy, which we accidentally completed a while ago. We finish the annexation of Milan in February of 1742, and we end the Neapolitan War 9 months later, taking 5 cores. Venice is next, with another reconquest war later that month. The revolution kicks off in Ming in April of 1745, but they choose to put it down and revolutions end up not being a factor this run. In July of 1745, we finish the annexation of Syria, and we end the Venetian War in August of the next year, taking all of our subjects' cores back. We release 3 more nations that same month: Grenada, Tunis, and Morocco. We use our new subjects to declare a reconquest war on Castile in July of 1747. This war takes about 4.5 years, and we take a number of cores back for both Grenada and Morocco, as well as several provinces for ourselves in northern Africa. Next up is another run at Egypt in April of 1753. We make peace after a 6-year war, taking a huge chunk of provinces across the Levant. We go for France again in July of 1759, who have reallied what's left of the Ottomans. It might seem obvious, but the logistics of these multi-front wars are a nightmare. Due to the nature of this run, we're exposed to attack all over Europe, and just getting our troops around requires non-stop naval transport. The additional fleet movement speed from our Norse naval doctrine has helped with this, but it's not my preferred playstyle, as we'll talk about in a little bit. I get thrown for a loop by this event in July of 1760. Delhi's yapping about us taking a holy city, but it doesn't immediately click for me what Jor-Salir is. I do the province search and then it makes sense. This is the Icelandic name for Jerusalem. The amount of localization that goes into nations hardly anybody plays, let's face it, Iceland isn't a very popular tag, is impressive to me. We make peace in November of 1763, taking just 1 province. I honestly don't remember why I didn't take more here. It might have been AE, but more likely I was just losing focus and getting tired. The clock's running out on this challenge. At this point, there's less than 60 years left, and we're not even that close. In addition, the non-stop wars against million-man armies are really starting to take a toll. I should have gone slower and taken more breaks, but I wanted to power through and see how close we could get. We go after Britain next, in March of 1765. We make peace after a 2.5-year war, taking 5 provinces, including London. We head east again for another war on the Ottomans in November of 1767. As you can see, Austria-Hungary has taken a big chunk of Western Anatolia here, which is unfortunate for us. I wanted to show one of my favorite things about theocracies here in January of 1768, choosing a successor. Since we have the pursuit of knowledge reform, we can see all the candidates' monarch skills, and we get a solid 525 error. A lot of times we can get even better skills than that. Note that since we upgraded our government rank, our ruler now has the title Paramount Priest or Priestess, and it seems to be gender agnostic since we end up with a number of priestesses. I don't know if this is a pagan thing or Norse thing, but whatever it is, it's a cool touch. Mid-war, I see that Trebizond has broken away from the Ottomans, and we declare in June of 1769. It's not too often that you see a Norse Trebizond, but unfortunately for them we need this land, and we annex them in just a few months. We end the Ottoman War in February of 1770, taking 13 provinces across Anatolia. Once again, I'm trying to block out Austria-Hungary with hopefully better results this time. In April of 1772, we give our new world colonies to the United States and Canada. I know this means giving up raiding targets, but honestly, we've been at war so much that I haven't had much time to raid in Europe, let alone on the east coast of North America. When I started this run, I had hoped to form the Roman Empire directly as Iceland without any tag changes along the way, but at this point I realize it's not going to happen, and I decide to pivot a bit. We may not be able to form the Roman Empire, but we only need a few more provinces for a North Sea Empire, which doesn't sound too bad. So it's time for our first nationalism war of the game against Russia in January of 1773. Aspects of this run have gotten kind of cursed. Russia has flipped Catholic, so of course they have 2 strong European allies in Castile and Austria-Hungary. We start the war by knocking out Castile first, but the war goes on so long that the truce expires and Castile actually attacks us in May of 1781 while we're still at war with Russia. We make a peace deal with Russia later that month. Nationalism CB plus late game admin efficiency means that we can take the rest of the Scandinavian region and unite our culture group. As a side note, take a look at this in April of 1784. How has Congo managed to pull both Castile and Portugal as allies while staying fetishist? When I play Congo, colonizers declare war on me every chance they get. Anyways, we end the Castilian War in September of 1785, taking 7 provinces across Iberia. Now that we're at peace, we can take the decision to form the North Sea Empire, which we do in May of 1786. This gives us a real mission tree and the option of Scandinavian ideas, but we'll stick with Norse ones. We declare another war on Great Britain in September of 1786. Mid-war we get declared on again, this time by Aragon in May of 1787. We wrap up the British War the following June, taking 4 provinces in southeastern England. We have to fight through France again, but we force Aragon to the table in November of 1784, taking 1 province on the French-Iberian border, 1 in Sicily, and forcing the return of a number of Tunisian corps in North Africa. Next up's a war against Tuscany in February of 1795. This war takes just a year and a half, and we take 2 provinces in the peace deal. Britain's next, with another war in April of 1797. We make peace in November of 1800, taking 4 provinces in southern Scotland. These provinces don't qualify for the Roman Empire, but at this point I'm mostly trying to clean up the North Sea Empire borders. I spent a few years doing religious and culture conversions, and in July of 1804 we finished the annexation of Tunis. It's at this point that I call it. We have time to win a couple more wars, but it's been obvious for a while that we're not restoring the Roman Empire this run. Let's do a quick nation overview, and then let's discuss what went wrong with this run and ideas on how it could be done. First off, let's look at how close we actually got. We have 228 of the required 425 provinces, or about 53%. In total, we have 321 provinces, meaning about 29% of our territory is outside of Roman Empire eligible provinces. We have almost 6,000 total dev, followed by Austria-Hungary with around 3,600. The United States is in 4th. They had a decent game beating up on Spanish colonial nations, and ended up pushing all the way down to Panama. If you need a final sign that this run is cursed, look at this. Catholic Russia is back under a PU with Austria. Here's a look at Norse culture, which we've managed to spread across several chunks of Europe and the Levant. Norse religion is even more widespread, across a total of 329 provinces, and tied with Reform for the 3rd largest religion in the world. Here's the final idea set. I skipped showing them, but I went admin and divine for our last 2. Here's the economy tab. As you can see, we're running a large surplus and could have afforded to expand the army, but we'll talk about that in a minute. As far as army quality, we have the 3rd highest morale in the game, with the United States in a surprising 1st. We're 2nd in naval morale, again behind the United States. There's one category in which nobody's close to us, army losses, with a staggering 10 million. I guess 360 years of more or less non-stop war will do that. Interestingly, our naval losses aren't nearly as bad, 162 ships, while our enemies lost significantly more. If the in-game stat screen is to be believed, we sank 11 enemy ships a year, which would put total enemy ships sunk by us around 4,000. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about what went wrong with this run. I'm going to break this into several sections. The first and most obvious issue that I underestimated was aggressive expansion. We had a double whammy here, being in both a different religious group, pagan and culture group, Scandinavian, than any of the needed 425 provinces. I can't imagine how bad this would have been without espionage ideas and Deus Vult. In a normal run, it's possible to take provinces without AE, via peaceful vassalization and allied core return. But with a no alliance restriction, no royal marriages, and a unique religion, we weren't really able to do either of these. All our provinces had to come from some sort of conquest, which means AE. I definitely could have pushed AE harder in the mid and late game, but we were already getting declared on and I didn't really want to fight a pan-European coalition, even though it was probably necessary. The second and related issue with this run was dealing with the ridiculous late-game alliance blocks. By the 1700s, it feels like small nations have at least 50,000 troops, medium-sized nations have at least 150,000, and large nations can have anywhere from 400 to 800k. With allies, this is more manageable, but in a no-allies run, this basically felt like Iceland versus the world again and again. The third issue with this run I'm going to call distractions. Some of these, like the Animus Zealots raft adventure, were necessary, but even that could have been executed better. I spent a lot of time at AE cleaning up borders in Scandinavia and North Germany that weren't required for the run goal. Stockholm's a good example. I wanted to restore the Temple of Uppsala, partially for the bonus and partially for the roleplay, but it's debatable whether it was worth the time. My roleplay for this run was as a sort of crazed, militant Norse theocracy, and as such I took the religious state privilege and did a bunch of culture conversions that weren't strictly necessary for the goal. With a goal as ambitious as this, you can't be wasting time with roleplay and distractions. The final issue is more of a personal playstyle one. My favorite part of EU4 is the early game, and this is partially due to simplicity. I don't really like managing 10 stacks of 60,000 troops across 3 theaters at the same time, and that's exactly what this challenge forces by the 1700s. By the late game, I was losing focus, neglecting economy, and just playing pretty badly in general. As you can see from the in-game screens, we had the economy and manpower to significantly expand our military, but I chose not to. I think a better, more patient player could have executed the mid to late game at a higher level and maybe even completed the challenge with the same basic strategy. Let's talk about alternative methods to complete this challenge, besides just playing better. Moving our capital to the New World and building up a large power base in Canada and the eastern US before striking at Europe is probably one of the easier ways to accomplish this challenge. Unfortunately, most of that playstyle, at least in the early game, is watching colony numbers tick up and beating up on helpless AI colonial nations and indigenous tags, which isn't really for me. Another effective strategy that I tried in an earlier playthrough is becoming a pirate republic. As an island nation, it's not hard to flip pirate, and there are several perks: coastal raiding, an early imperialism CB, and eventually even the ability to raise provinces. Unfortunately, going pirate has a major drawback. there's a significant province governing cost penalty that we aren't able to remove until really late in the game. Besides, by going Norse, we have other ways to get coastal raiding, which makes this less of an advantage. One potential strategy that I'd like to get to work is immediately trying to move to the Mediterranean after getting independence. It's usually possible to no-CB a weak Italian or Balkan nation, vassalize them, and use them to get around colonial range limitations. I would much rather start this challenge in Italy than in North Germany. There are two things that make migrating tricky for this run. First, getting independence takes time, usually about 10 years. By then, a lot of the easy targets in the Mediterranean are gone. Second, and more importantly, moving south would make it harder to convert to the Norse religion, which is already somewhat tricky due to the colonial range restrictions on rebels. Another option is using one or more strong formable nations. There are lots of options here depending on which direction we go: HRE, British Isles, Mediterranean, and so on. In this run, I had a vision of staying Iceland until the very end, but there's no doubt that held us back significantly. Formable nations can offer strong mission trees and permanent claims and buffs that Iceland, with a generic mission tree, just doesn't have. Staying Catholic and delaying the Norse conversion could also be effective, although it feels against the spirit of the challenge. My last idea is the most radical, and I'm actually not sure how viable it would be. That would be to stay a Catholic monarchy for long enough to become the emperor of the HRE and pass the reform that guarantees that we stay emperor regardless of religion. We could then flip Norse and use the HRE vassal swarm to try to complete the challenge. I've never done a run with a pagan HRE emperor, and it sounds like it could be fun. Obviously, this would involve dropping the theocracy part of the challenge, and timing could be an issue, but I'm curious to test it out. We could also just make the challenge easier. For example, dropping the no allies rule, but I don't think I want to do that. With allies, I think this challenge becomes way too easy. Please share in the comments if you all have thoughts on the best way to do this. I'm probably missing something obvious, and I love to hear new ideas. Also, let me know if you want to see me take another run at this or you'd rather see something else. I think I'm going to do another run first, but I'm definitely open to trying this one again in the future. As always, thanks for watching, especially if you made it this far, and I'll see you in the next one.